Clearly, there's a lot of panic around. People have a lot of fear. The reason for the fear is they think bad things will happen to them. It can be guaranteed bad things will happen to you before you die, and you will definitely die. So if you're clear that there is shit available and it's coming your way and you're going to die, then you can relax, because this is not an unknown. And the basis of Buddhist practice is to be able to free ourselves from fear. When we feel something is going to happen to me, that's based on the idea that I exist as an object that can be acted upon by forces. Now, of course, there are aspects of how we manifest which are indeed impacted. If it rains, we get wet. If it's cold, we start to shiver. So we are clearly in relation with the environment. But if all the sense of our identity formulates around a proposition, I am this vulnerable entity, and I need to protect myself at all cost, me first, then we have both a hostility towards the environment and an anxious sense of vulnerability about being at the mercy of forces. So we want to release ourselves from the entrapment in being a thing which is blown about like a leaf in the autumn wind. And the whole function of the Buddhist teachings on all the many different levels is to awaken to the basis of our existence and the manifestation of our existence, and see that these are not two different things. It's not that we have a pure self somewhere else, or we have a soul hidden inside us. At this very moment, this room being here together is revealed to us directly in our awareness and indirectly as it's processed through our interpretation. Because we tend to be mesmerized by the conceptual movement of our interpretation, we're not directly in touch with the freshness of being here. So the function of the practice is to relax our fixation on self-construction and become more aware of simply being present. And so, with the time available to us, I want to explain, set out for you how the mind actually is, and what the mind actually is, and how this becomes obscured, how this becomes covered up for us. But first of all, we could just do some simple sitting. When we sit, we're just here. We're not trying to do anything. We're not trying to be mindful or develop a particular way of relating to our experience. We simply want to be with whatever is occurring. That may seem quite a dull kind of experience, or it could be a bright experience. However it is, we want to not be active. Most of our life is spent in active processing, in working things out, in pattern formation, in making sense of things, of linking and thinking and building pictures, which are very busy, very elaborated, but of course collapse in time, because, as the Buddha said on many occasions, everything which has a cause, everything which has a beginning, will come to an end. So whatever constructs we develop vanish. And when we think about our lives and the various stages that we've lived through, we've encountered different kinds of experience. Many events seem terribly real and important, activities, people, and they've vanished. We don't do these things anymore. We don't meet these people anymore. So all the energy that we invested in these particular structures that seem so vital, so vibrant, so necessary for us to be ourselves, they vanish. And then we reconstitute it into a new formation and a new formation, and this is how our life tumbles on. So when we sit, We want to not get involved in relating to what is arising, but just to observe it. Just see, oh, not even to note that this is arising, that is arising, but just to allow life to flow through our presence here. Whether it's something arising in the body or something arising in the room. Usually for this kind of practice, we sit in an open way, maybe hands on the knees rather than in the lap. The gaze is open into the space in front of us. We're not separating inside and outside, and as we'll come to see, this is somewhat artificial. This is a construction of the play of the mind. So we want to just allow whatever is occurring to occur and not do anything with it. We are addicted to activity. And part of the function of that activity is to make ourselves, our sense of ourselves, essential and vital to our interpretation of what is going on. So that the world gets constellated around I, me, myself, my embodiment, my thoughts, my plans, what's important to me. So we're constantly pulling things in which confirm our identity and trying to push out the things that don't do that. It's a lot of work. So this is just let it happen. Let it happen. Oh, but I might feel bad. Oh, and how long will you feel bad for? But I don't like this. And it's gone. So the more you see that experience is transient, the less you have to engage in managing it. We are not the center of the world. Neither are we mere peripheral functions. We are engaged and participating. And if you are participating, there's a time to move forward and a time to move back. So meditation is simply the time when you move back. You release the patterns of arousal and involvement and allow whatever is occurring to occur. So we sit like this for a while. Okay. The key thing in meditation is not to try too hard. We're not attempting to construct something new. We want to take a holiday from construction. Dzogchen, the name of this particular orientation inside the Buddha Dharma, indicates something which is complete, finished, doesn't need any alteration, any improvement. It's something which is whole, which has an integrity. This is the basis of our existence. We live, however, in a world of fragmentation, of perceiving aspects of experience, of a selective attention, of privileging certain aspects of our experience, saying this is good and I want more of it, this is not so good and I want less of it. And because of that, we become very active trying to manage our life. This is the nature of the existence of the ego. We want to release ourselves from this as the primary fixation. The ego is not something bad, it's just overburdened. When we release the requirement that the ego does everything, we start to find that the ego is in fact a ray of light, a manifestation, a pulse of the energy of our basic awareness. In Dzogchen, we have two main aspects: the primordial purity of the mind, which means it's never been contaminated, it's never been mixed with anything else, and we'll look at that in some detail. And the second aspect is from this, everything arises instantly, immediately, that our experience is not a construct, it's not something which has to be built up. The build-up that we have is layered on top of the immediate freshness of experience. So when we do the sitting practice, and we'll do it quite a few times, the main instruction is don't merge with what is arising and don't push away what is arising. Merging with what is arising is the tendency in the direction of desire, a need for more, a need for confluence, fusion, absence of the burden of self, and so on. And pushing things away is a gesture or a movement in the family of aversion or anger. I don't want to be involved in this, I want to get rid of this. So these two aspects of meditation relate to primordial purity and to immediate manifestation. Primordial purity means it's untouched, it's complete. So when we go to involve ourselves in a thought, a feeling, a memory, as if we need this, what do we need it for? You know, a lot of the time our life is like being a child on the floor, and you've got a whole mass of Lego in front of you, and you're trying to build something, and you're scrabbling around trying to find exactly the piece that's going to fit and let you make the boat or the tower or the plane or whatever. So some things are very important and other things are not important. Important for what? When you start to sit with your mind, you see all thoughts arise and pass. All feelings arise and pass. All sensations arise and pass. You cannot build a house with water. These are all transient phenomena. But in our mental dullness, we imagine that we can do the impossible, that we can make a stable existence out of transient phenomena. And this is why samsara, this movement of experience after experience, life after life, keeps turning. Because we're pumping so much energy into the impossible task of making something stable, reliable, enduring, wonderful, when in fact it's fading all the time. Now, if we want it to be stable, the fading becomes a problem. So then we have to try harder and try harder. But it's fading. All phenomena are impermanent. Whether these are mental phenomena, the phenomena of the senses, the phenomena that we experience in the outside world, the five elements and so on. Movement is what is effortlessly arising. Stillness is the primordial purity which is there from the very beginning. So when we sit in the practice and we find ourselves wanting to hang on to a thought or being caught up in a thought, we don't have to try to release ourselves, because then you would go from merger to aversion. You simply stay present. The thought will go. The sensation will go. Then we start to see, oh, a lot of the action that I am engaged in is unnecessary. Thoughts come. I'm not thinking them. They come and reveal themselves. If I grab hold of one or two of them, I say, oh, I'm thinking this. But I didn't make the thought. I didn't make the sensation. I didn't cause the memory to suddenly arise. This is offered. We are the recipient participants in the unfolding of the generosity, of the potential, of the basis of our awareness. So the more we see this, the more we can relax, and things come to mind. They manifest as required. We don't have to do it. It's doing. So, I just set out a little bit the traditional understanding of how our experience arises, and we do more meditation practice. Generally speaking, the teaching is set out in terms of the ground or the basis or the source, then the path and the result. The ground means the basis of experience. If the earth wasn't here, we wouldn't be able to build things on top of it. you have to have some solidity. If you want to build a house, you need to check, is the soil strong enough to support what is being generated, what will be put on top of it. We have to see that there is a proper foundation. Because we live in a world of our seemingly solid bodies, we want to have solid ground under our feet. We don't like to slip or fall. We like to be able to stand firm. So our mind shifts towards the foundation being merged conceptually with the earth element. A basis should be solid, reliable, predictable. It should be something you can get hold of and test. Lots of engineers go around with the machines testing, is this earth solid enough, secure enough to build something on top? And they dig in, put in concrete to make foundations. So, when Buddhist teachings are coming into the West, we're faced with lots and lots of problems of language. Because language is a reverberating network. Words have meaning because of association. One word by itself has no meaning. Words play together, and the interplay of words generates meaning. In the West, our European languages have been around a long time. We have a very, very rich culture, so our words are thick with associations. When Buddhism came into Tibet, their language was, if you like, much thinner. And so they were able to absorb a lot of Buddhist ideas directly as the core meaning of words. So when you're reading a Tibetan text, it's like, oh, this word is definitely indicating that. But if we use a word like awareness or consciousness, in the West, people have many, many different readings of what that means. A word like mind has many ideas for people. For a lot of people, it's something inside your skull. It's something generated by electrochemical activity in the brain. That's not at all a view in Dharma. So we have to be quite sensitive to how we use language and to try to hold a kind of open space of rethinking the connotations of certain kind of words. So ground is not about something solid from this point of view. The basis of our existence, as the texts say, is marked by 5 qualities. You could say it's marked by 1 billion qualities, but 5 are set out. The first is it's unconstructed, dumache. It hasn't been gathered together. When we look around in this room, everything we see is a compound. The camera is a compound, the chairs are a compound, the way the wooden flooring is set out, the electrical supply line, our bodies, compounded. We are like a marketplace in which many factors have come together to generate the sense of this is my body. We have teeth. If the teeth go bad, the dentist takes them out. If you want to have short hair, you go to the barber. He cuts off your hair. You trim your nails. We're constantly adjusting the body. It's a working process. Motor cars, everything in the city, everything in the shops, these are compounded. And the compounds are influenced by many different factors. Now that people will get more anxious, that the virus will cause them to be locked in their house, they want to go and buy lots of things, lots of tin food, toilet paper, tissues, sprays, and so on. 2 months ago, that wasn't in anyone's mind. Now this thought form arises, and we, as constructed creatures, incorporate this attitude of anxiety into ourselves, and then it drives us to spend our money in new ways. So that's what we experience. That's what compounded means. It's an interplay of factors. But the ground, the source out of which we are arising, and this room, and the whole of London, out of which everything is arising moment by moment, is not compounded. It is simple, pure, not a mixture. not artificial. It's not contrived. The second term that's used to describe it is arising of itself. If we say self-arising, it's as if there is some kind of self in it that's causing it to arise. There's not any little person in there doing it. There isn't a doer. The idea of the doer is very, very strong in our culture. In the Christian tradition, God is the first doer. The one that makes things happen. But this ground is not made by anyone, and what occurs with the ground is not made by the ground. So our notion of a subject and an object, a consciousness that regards the situation and does something, is not what's applied here. So in the book of Genesis it describes God makes the world, and every now and then he has a look around and he says, oh, that's good. Oh, that's very nice. That's good. Oh, God said. That's why he has a little rest on the seventh day. He said, done enough. But our ground is never stopping. It's always going. It doesn't need a holiday because it doesn't get tired because it hasn't done anything. The ground or the source is the space of revelation. And we'll start to see more what this term like revelation can mean. The third aspect of the ground is called Hlongyang. In Tibetan means deep and vast. It means infinite. It has no border, no limit. You can't find it in any way. When we look around our life, everything has some limit. Number one, your bank balance has a limit. Your health has a limit. Your energy to do things has a limit. Your possessions have a limit. The extent of a country has a limit. What can be described in language has a limit. Everything you review, it has a particular shaping. That is to say, the formulation of the identity of any phenomena is inseparable from the law of exclusion. If something is a banana, it's a banana not just in its banananess, but because banananess is not an inherent quality of the banana. Banananess is linked to the fact of the absence of orangeness, the absence of appleness. So appleness, orangeness, toffiness is being excluded, and once you've got rid of all this other stuff, you've got your banana. So this is how the mind identifies phenomena. This means not that. That means not this. Our thinking would collapse if this could be that and that could be this. We get used to the fact that politicians lie all the time, and it's quite annoying. When people lie to us, they pretend that this is that, and we think, fuck you. We don't like that. That's not very nice. We like people to be straightforward. If this is this, and that is that, we relax a little bit. So, exclusion, otherness, is the dynamic basis for the assertion of self. The thisness of this is the absence of the thatness of that. So that's delimitation as the basis of apprehending something as an entity. If you're a man, you're not a woman. If you're a child, you're not an adult, and so on. So you have categories which are formulated by mutual exclusion. So this term, Hlongyang, means none of that applies. None of that applies. It is not established through mental processing. It's not an idea. It's not created on the basis of categories. In London, although you wouldn't know it if you walk around here and you see the crazy kind of building that goes on, you're supposed to have planning permission. In the planning permission, it tells you what you're entitled to do and what you can't do. So this is valid, this is not valid. If you go for a job interview, they've got a checklist of qualities and they say whether you fit in their criteria or not. So this is how life proceeds. Organization through categories. The infinity of the ground itself is not contained or defined in any categories. The fourth aspect is that it is inexpressible. So we're meeting on the weekend because we're sad, bored, lonely people who've nothing better to do. So we're going to talk and listen a lot about things which are inexpressible. So many books about the inexpressible. How is this possible? It's because there are two factors which operate together. Wisdom, which is silent, gives us access to the inexpressible. Compassion is relational and connective, and that gives us access to the movement of belonging together. So going back to these two basic principles, silence and primordial purity are inseparable, and language is one of the aspects of instant manifestation or revelation or presence. Language flows. So through language, we throw out little lines, gestures of connectivity through which we can weave something. Sometimes that weaving is constructive and sometimes it's deconstructive. That is to say, we're trying to create self-dissolving structures. So when you're a child and you're on the beach and you build sandcastles, there's some excitement in building the sandcastle, but there's also the other kind of excitement of the wave coming in and washing your sandcastle away. All that you did is just washed away. And one of the great things of going to school, being in primary school, is you get a little box or a little bag with your pencils and so on, and you get a rubber. And the rubber is really good because you can rub things out. Of course, it doesn't rub out very cleanly. So as we try to correct our lives, we end up with this palimpsest of endless accretions of marking and rubbing and marking and rubbing. You find that a lot in modern art. So when something is inexpressible, it doesn't mean that you can simply find it through silence, because we get lost. Because we are creatures of expression. We are energetic manifestation. So just sitting quiet with all these reverberations going around, unless you find a way to release yourself from their intoxicating power, like the sirens on the rock, calling and calling, we just get pulled this way and that way and find ourselves swirling all over the place. So the function of the explanation is not to make you a Buddhist or to convert you into anything. It's to give you screwdrivers whereby you can loosen the screws that are holding this fabricated structure of yourself in place. When you loosen the structure of the self, it's not that you have no self, you get a flexible, pliable self. It's the rigidity of the self construct that is the problem. Self per se is not a problem. Self as responsivity, of being able to relate to other people in different ways according to circumstances, that's very beautiful. You wouldn't have any empathic attunement or compassion unless you were able to do that. It is the fixation which causes the problem. So the fifth aspect of the source or ground or base is that the categories of samsara and nirvana don't touch it. So generally speaking, the samsara means entrapment, imprisonment, being caught up in something, and nirvana means the peace that comes from the ending of that enthrallment, that elaboration, that ceaseless activity. The ground has nothing to do with that. All the constructs that we have can't touch the ground. It is beyond conceptualization. Now, if you've spent your life in learning, in going to school, and then maybe college, university, and so on, and you spend your life moving concepts around, it is as if concepts are the sole vehicle of your existence. So the idea that something can't be caught through concepts means, well, that's me out of the game, because that's all I've got. And it's all I've got because I know it's all I've got. And then you think about it. I don't know what this guy's talking about because blah, 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 blah. So we process experience, adding bits, customizing what we hear, what we read in terms of our own experience. This is conceptual elaboration. But this is not the totality of our presence. We also have a pre-conceptual awareness. So when we use the term this weekend anyway, awareness, that's what it's referring to. Something which is not generated by concepts, which is not formulated through concepts, but also something which is not oppositional to concepts. Concepts are like clouds or rainbows. They arise in the space of the mind and they pass through it. When you have a typical day in London, you see this mass of grey clouds, and it's as if there is only cloud. And then every now and then the blue breaks through, as if it's from a little special moment. When a big wind blows and all the clouds go, you see, oh, wow, this infinite open blue sky. The status of the cloud is altered. Instead of the cloud being the definition of the nature of the sky, the truth of it, another grey day, this is how it is. This is me in my concepts about who I am. Now you see, wow, there's some open space, a space of potential, of possibility. And therefore the concepts arising and passing and moving in this space of awareness are not the enemy. They are like a breath of wind. You know, when you look at these old maps and you see in the corners these little cherubim, little angel forms, and blowing and puffing, and the ships driving across the sea. Well, this is our life. A concept arises and it moves you, open or closed. We pulsate to this rhythmic functioning of concepts arising in our mind. They are energy. So, a basic view here, which is different from the view established in our education, is that concepts belong in the family of compassion. Concepts are about linking, about connectivity. Indeed, in psychoanalysis we say thinking is linking. We're always linking ourselves into certain suppositions, propositions, and so on. That is pattern formation. Pattern formation allows us to relate to different people. When we have a break and you can chat to different people, you find yourself talking in different ways with different people. That's just how it is. You can't say the same thing to everyone unless you're the queen. Pleased to meet you, pleased to meet you, pleased to meet you. Obviously that's a lie. When you actually relate to people, you're not necessarily pleased to meet them. You might look at someone and think, whoa, nothing to say to you. That is an energetic vibration. That's quite valid. It's not usually allowed in the rules of politeness, because politeness means pretense. If I pretend I like you, do I like you? No, I'm actually insulting you. And I'm deceiving myself. Because if you find that you don't have an energetic connection with someone, that is primary. That is what is here. That is the quality of the field, the phenomenological field that you inhabit. And so if you attend to it, then you think, Okay, what do I do with that? Namkhai Norbu, who is a great yogi and scholar who started the Dzogchen community, he pointed out again and again that we have to work with circumstances. Circumstances are not a projected idea that we have of how we would like it to be, but it means what is revealed to us in our interaction. We click with some people, and with other people we're thinking, nothing to say. So that is very, very interesting. When you walk in the park, your eye is caught by some trees more than others. You see some bushes and they look a bit dreary. There's nothing to do there. But if you were an artist and you got out your sketch pad, you might be fascinated by the entangled nature of the small branches in it. It depends on you. It is not a final objectivizing statement about the quality of the other. If you don't click, that is relational. It doesn't mean they're stupid or boring or whatever your definitive conclusion might be about them. This is a field of potential. And the question then is, how do we work with it? You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. If it's a sow's ear situation, what do? Make a soup. But you can't make a silk purse. The potential is revealed. So an awful lot of our life, our social life, is artificial. Whatever we feel about Brexit, traditionally the British and the French are fairly hostile. Now, one of the reasons for the development of the European Union was to put an end to wars, was to make people, races or national groups that don't like each other, like the French and the Germans, bind them together so that if they attacked the other, they would be attacking themselves. So that murder would be suicidal. Probably not going to work in the long run, because actually there is a basic antipathy between groups. Greece has been flooded by immigrants. Southern Italy has been flooded by immigrants. And the northern European countries say, so sad for you. What a difficult time you're having there. Oh, I wouldn't like to be you. And you'd like some of my money to help you? I don't think so. It's your problem. That's what you see. That is life. That is the topology of our existence. That people's blah, blah, sweet, 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 and they act sour, bitter, selfish. That's the fact of it. These countries are not being rescued. So we have to see the shaping of the world and not pretend that things are better, but not become immersed in depression and make them worse than they are. But if you stay with the actual shaping of your lived experience and the environment as it's revealed to you, then participation starts to become meaningful. So this is what this fifth aspect of the ground means. That conceptualization, this is good, this is not good, this is limitation called samsara, this is freedom called nirvana. You won't find the ground of your being. You won't find your own basis by sitting in a concept. You don't have to block concepts. You just have to not use them improperly. Nowadays we have a sensitivity to child abuse, to environmental abuse. Well, we also need to have a sensitivity to concept abuse and to ego abuse. The ego cannot get enlightened. So when people spend a lot of time meditating to try to get enlightened, and they try very hard from their ego position, the ego doesn't get enlightened. Because the ego is an aspect of energy. It is not the ground of being. So if you misconstrue, if you misunderstand the actuality of how our mind functions, you keep trying to make energy stable. The ego is an energetic formation. Our manifestation is energetic and changing and pulsing in the field of energy. It's always moving. We have to participate. Working with circumstances means being present in your senses without formulating positions in a rigid way before an event, without building up energized positions of hopes and fears, but receiving and responding. This, okay. This is it, okay. I would have liked, it would have been wonderful if. That's a thought. That's a feeling tone which is arising and passing. Was it true? If only it had worked out with that person, that would have been amazing. My dear, are you a virgin? Presumably you've been in relations before. Did they work out? No. Did you believe they would work out? Yes. You're a wally. This is how it is. We don't know. Hopes and fears are not a very good indicator of how it will be. How it will be is how it will be. Which means you have to hang in there with the happenstance of existence. As we started to look yesterday, we're not the masters of the situation. Neither are we the slaves of events. We are participants. We have a certain possibility of influencing events, but we're not in control. Influencing is, of course, a very beautiful word, because it indicates the fluidity of ourselves. If you want to influence events, you have to become fluid. If you're rigid and firm, you try to control, you exert some kind of mastery, but action brings reaction. Whereas if you're fluid and you get a proximal meeting with the actual shape of how someone else is, then something comes into possibility. What blocks that is our idea of what I would like to happen, what I believe needs to happen, what I'm sure should happen. And when you hear words like that, phrases like that, you can feel the solidity in them. I need you. What for? But I just need you. No, you don't. The one thing you don't need is another person. What are you going to do with them? Do you want them 24 hours a day? 24 hours a day? You really want them 24 hours a day? Probably not. So what you're saying is, I need you from time to time, on my terms. So when you need me, I might not need you. I hope that's okay. Gets a bit tricky, doesn't it? So we have to be we just observe this solidification of the idea of the other. People are not things. People are not knowable. We are not things. We are not knowable. So it's not a set-piece interaction. It's a fluid, evolving matrix of potential. So this is the generosity of the ground, the unfixity, the undefinability of the ground. Doesn't mean that it's something vague and over the hill. It's not some mystic quintessence, something which has nothing to do with us. It is the actual basis of how we manifest. That in not being someone, we can be some many. You can be many, many people, and you are. You behave differently with different people, with parents, with children, with bosses, with policemen. You are constellated. You come into your shaping in relation to the event. That's one of the indicators in psychiatry of someone having severe problems if they are unable to do that. The person who just is themselves all the time is mad. It's just mad. If somebody is under the power, the hellish power of intense OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, they feel they have to wash their hands again and again, they have to wash the towels in the house, they have to vacuum the floor, whatever's happening, they just have to. That is non-relational. That is a monologic universe which is isolated and lonely and hellish. We come into being in the pulsation of give and take, of mutual modification, which is something quite helpful and useful. So that's the beginning of the outlining of the meaning of the ground or the basis. This is our basis. We're not talking about anything abstract or foreign. Every moment we are manifesting from this space. So we sit here, we move around, you're interested maybe in some things I say, not so interested in others. You have fluctuations of your presence in this room. Huh? If you were a fixed thing, you could just turn it on and keep it at a standard level. But you have pulsations, some of which are evoked by external factors, external to your embodiment. Some arise from inside your body, some sensation, or you hook into an idea that seems interesting. This is pulsing all the time. So how come you can have this variety? Variety, diversity, is not the same as fragmentation. If you have one thing, like a glass, and it's shaped and it's held in place by the factors of maintenance, that is to say, not being hit or dropped, it's not existing in itself. The glass seems to exist in itself. It's a glass in my right hand, now it's a glass in my left hand. That's amazing. It must be the same glass. I have two hands and one glass moves between these two hands. Ladies and gentlemen, this is spectacular. So it seems that the glass is just a glass in itself. But the glass exists supported by invisible forces, the factors of maintenance. Because this glass is starting to weigh on my hand. There is a force called gravity. And if I get tired and let go of it, it will hit the floor and the glass will break. It will fragment. Yeah. So the factors of maintenance are always present with everything we see. And they can be influenced. People get a pain in their body, they go to the doctor says, I think you should go to the hospital, have a scan. Oh, the hospital doctor says, looks like cancer. And then a whole process occurs. The person didn't order cancer, they didn't pray for cancer, they don't want cancer, but they have cancer. Or at least cancer is the word we use to interpret this particular structuring of the energy of the body. That is to say, the sense of self that we have is held in place by many factors which we take for granted. Because I'm just me being me. No, we're not. We have supportive factors and unsupportive factors, and that's what this virus can show us. That if the virus comes into your body, and if you have many preconditions of vulnerability, it can be a cause of your death. For someone else, it won't be a cause of their death, because their respiratory system is functioning very well, and they're basically healthy. They're probably not going to be affected so strongly. But if you have these vulnerabilities, the meeting of the virus and the vulnerabilities leads into a condition. And of course we have the NHS, which is the best health service in the world. It's amazing. It's about to collapse. It's already collapsing. We know this. There aren't enough ambulances. There aren't enough A&E nurses. We've got shortfalls everywhere. And if hundreds of thousands of people need to be admitted to intensive care, where will we send them? It's like that. So the idea the NHS is the best health service in the world is a lie maintained by naive belief. We're the best nation. We're the best. We're going it alone. We're leaving Europe. Britain stands up. We've been great before and we will be great again. we will be great liars and cheaters. We're liars and cheaters, that's how we got our colonies, that's how we got all our dosh, going into other countries and ripping them off and pretending we are the natural-born rulers of them. That's what we live in, a world of fantasy ideas. And as long as the factors that maintain the fantasy are running, the fantasy is maintained, and then it's gone. And then it's gone. So what does that mean? It means this is unstable. Why is it unstable? Because it's dynamic and energetic and interactive. So if you start to see, oh, interaction's not so bad. Being with you may be difficult, but I think I would prefer it to solitary confinement. Imagine if you were stuck in a room in a prison all by yourself, and there's a little hole at the bottom of the door and they stick a plate of food in twice a day. And that's all. And the guard doesn't speak to you. That would not be very nice. You would want the guard to say at least fuck off or something. Something to acknowledge that you exist. And if you didn't have that, you would start to get a bit thinned inside. We are interactive beings because we are part of this open field. This is Hlundrup. The whole field arises at once, instantly, interactively. So this is a very helpful notion, I think. As we move in our lives, we see, we expand, we open with certain people and we close with others. When you see these speeded up films of nature, flowers opening and closing, we're just like that. We open and close, we pulsate. Now, you could draw conclusions as we normally do. I like this person, I don't like that person, but that's an interpretation after the fact, because we find ourselves not being at ease with that person, which is an energetic quality. The vibration, the horripilation that goes on between you is muted. You can't find them. You can't kind of get on their wavelength. You think, oh. And from that you can draw a conclusion, oh, they're not very nice, or they're difficult. Well, difficult for you. Then you see them blethering away with someone else. Not difficult with that person. You say, oh, this is the unique specificity of myself emerging in this field. So if you imagine that the ground is like the earth, and from the earth there is a field, and in the field there are many kind of wildflowers, many kind of grasses, nettles, burdock, thorns, all kinds of things are growing, and in that there you are, a little daisy. You're just a little daisy looking around, and there's all kind of other flowers and creatures in that field. That's what we are. We are part of a field. We're not homogenized. We're not the same as other people. Culture is an attempt to homogenize. The unique specificity that is not a kind of invitation to narcissism. It's not about the specialness of myself, which would put me in a difference from you, but rather in being this energetic form at this moment, under these conditions, which will not endure, I find myself available or less available for some kind of interaction. It is pulsation. Now, if it's dynamic and pulsating and moving and unpredictable, the one thing you have to do is be there. You have to be present. If you're not present, you get Skyped. You get something Skypes into you and you get bumped around because you were distracted. You were caught in thought and you were not part of the field. You see that? Walking around in the city, most people are not on the street. They're somewhere else, in their phone, in their memories, in their thoughts, but they're not there. They're not seeing the architecture, the glistening of the light on the street and so on. They're not there. When you are present as part of the field is your existence. Because when you hear the blackbird sing, how sweet. It stops you. How could you continue walking? Because the blackbird is singing. This is the beginning and end of the world. And then the blackbird goes silent and your feet start moving again. This is a life interrupted by participation. You put the blinkers on and you're very dutiful and you do what you have to do, then everything is an interruption to my trajectory through life, which is the basis of a modern capitalist economy. That people should go to work and be diligent and try hard and be productive. That their value is their productivity, their outcome, not the process. But being alive is about the process of receiving and responding. So you hear the bird and it softens your heart. And then you see more. You hear and so you see. And your body softens, the muscles soften, the sinews open, your hips relax. Oh, you feel more alive. And that can happen all the time with anything. Light glistening on a motor car, some dog shit on the pavement, you see the shape of it. Oh. Henry Moore, he might have been interested in that. Because it's fascinating, but you think it's dirty dog shit. Oh, what is it? It's a shape glistening, a paper bag blowing. It's just like that. In that movie, American Beauty, there's that wonderful scene when the bag is just blowing up in the wind and the mind stops. The mind can stop all the time. We don't have to have so much interpretation. We don't have to try to achieve a mastery of knowledge over events, but we can find ourselves being with events. So that's the possibility of the open ground, that moment by moment you are emerging fresh from the ground, as is everything else. So we've got here a kind of tension between our habitual sense of the sameness of the world, the predictability of the world. So some people have been in this room before. That's a reasonable sentence in the English language. They have been in this room before. Which room is that? That's this room. But they've never been in this room before. Because this room is this. The particular people in it, the way the light is coming in through the windows and so on. This is a March light with a slightly grey sky, pockets of blue. Different people in different postures, bodies moving in different ways. This room is this. Fresh, unrepeatable. Unrepeatable. This is time. When we see the unrepeatability of the moment, it becomes the infinite moment of just this. 100%, fully this. That's Dzogpa Chimbo. It's complete. It's the whole shebang, all at once, just like that. But when you think, no, I know where it is, the toilets are there, you can make a cup of tea there, there's an electric kettle and this and that, you dull your sense of what is there. You're no longer curious because you know. That's fascinating. You can explore that for yourself. My thought goes ahead of me. And what does it do? It sprays shit over everything. If you drive in Germany in the springtime, they spray pig shit on the fields and the smell is unbelievable. But that's what we do. We make the world toxic with our interpretation. And it's a movement of mastery. It's a deathly mastery. Because instead of the freshness of the world stopping us and interrupting us and alerting us to this is now, the projection of the thought encapsulate the field of phenomena into what we take to be the known. But of course it's never quite the way we know it. It's a bit annoying. I thought it was going to be like that. But I'm sure it should be like that. I used to go to this cafe. The coffee was good. I was there this morning. It's terrible. I don't know what happened. Oh. Constantly people are blethering about these little disturbances in life because they want to believe they can predict. They want to believe that knowledge gives them access to things as they are, but in fact knowledge covers it. Awareness is always fresh. Conceptual knowledge is stale because you're taking something from the past, bringing it into the present, and using it as a tool to predict the future. In Buddhism, this is called the movement of the three times, past, present, and future. And the present in that sequence is not the instant fresh present of being aware, but it is the conceptually wrapped present which stands as this moment because of that moment. It's riding on the shoulders of the past because I make this moment for myself. It's a construct. It's an interpretation on the basis of having been here before. Oh, there's 2 toilets around the corner. Oh, thank you. That's useful. Helpful. The words can come out of your mouth, but it's what that does to you. You can say these words in a very light way and they truly dissolve, self-arising, self-liberating, or there can be a small accretion, a small feedback loop, a self-reflexive movement in which, oh, I know a thing or two. I know something. You didn't know, but I knew. Often we're not very conscious of that, but this is how the ego is fed, through the affirmation of its enduring existence on the basis that the past and the present and the future are linked together. I know something. It comes back to me, therefore I can predict. But when you're coming here, you can predict, if you know this building, you can predict roughly how it's going to be. But when you come in, if you're at all present, you have a fine experience of the actuality of how people sit, how their hair is, what kind of clothes they're wearing, and so on. Postures, gestures, and so on. That's not rough. That is exquisite. That is so unbelievably precise. How everyone is sitting. Some people are leaning on the wall, some people are tilted, some people look as if they're about to fall over. All kind of things. That is how it is. Oh, we should sit up straight. Why? Just like that. It's perfect as it is. It's just this. But you didn't know it was going to be like that. It is a revelation. The concept is the block to experiencing the freshness of the revelation. Because if you think you know, you don't have to look. You assume. And we'll start to see how assumption is a very dulling factor in our lives. If you assume that you know, you don't need to look. And if you don't look, you won't see. And so thought becomes the mastery, the vehicle of mastery in the world. So the ground, when we open to it, and every time we do the meditation, we have the possibility of opening to it. The ground is the basis of the deconstruction of the empire of the conceptual self. The solidification which is generated by the juxtaposition of self-liberating moments. Although the moments are vanishing, they can feed into the sense of their enduring presence. And this is always here, all the time. So as the text say, there is one ground and two paths. If you see the ground, if you open to the ground, then you have the revelation of awareness, fresh awareness. If you don't attend to the ground, if your life is based entirely on an immersion in conceptual construction, then this blizzard of thought, this forest of feelings, encapsulate you and you wander on your journey down these little restricted pathways and then you die. But because you've been building up a sense of subject and object, me in here, the world out there, trying to work it out, get more of what I like, get less of what I don't like, the condensation, the densification, the constriction into the reverberation of a predictable I takes us into life after life after life without liberation. Liberation means you awaken on the ground. So the basic proposition is very simple. If you open to the open, it's open. If you close to the open, it's closed. Most of the time, it's closed for us because we're holding it closed. And we want it to be closed because if it was open, who would I be? You can't know. You can't know. It will be what it is. And when you look at your actual life, you never ever thought it would be like this. Life is surprising. Fucking hell, what is this? Is this it? How did I get here? It wasn't a plan. So we didn't know, but we pretend we know, and that blocks us saying, wow, I'm working in a field of mutual evocation. I come into being with you in this particular way, in this particular moment. This is it. Wow. And this is it, and this is it, endlessly, forever and ever. And it's not exhausting, because this is arising from the ever-open ground as the energy of the ground. It's not being solidified as I, me, myself, and I have to hold myself together, and I have to make sure my life works out okay. And the burdened self is terribly exhausting. And the free moment of presence in the interactive field is energizing. Time for a cup of tea.